to our next episode of Future Focused CXOs. I have a very, very unique guest today. She's been called as Turnaround Queen, and we will get into why. And she has been into the banking sector. She has worked with small credit unions to a big bank, came back to a company which is very interesting. She will get into it. But without any further delay, let me welcome Alisha Crafton to our podcast. She is the Chief Growth Officer for Kasasa. And Alisha, welcome to the podcast. Can you give us a brief introduction about yourself, and let's jump into what Kasasa does and why you're a turnaround queen.
Yeah, awesome. Hi, everybody. Like you said, Alisha Crafton, Chief Growth Officer at Kasasa. What that basically means is I'm the executive team member on the hook for our 800 plus banks and credit unions across the country and just them being successful. What Kasasa does, just really high level, we work with community financial institutions that can be 50 million in assets all the way up to 25, 30 billion in assets, just really making sure that as an institution that they have the products and services that break through the clutter. We use things like user experience, financial engineering, really understanding consumer behavior economics to drive balance sheet impact and net new customer acquisitions. So that's quickly what we do. I've been with Kasasa for 10 years. I was a prior client, really love the culture, the energy of what we've created, and then have about 10 years in the nonprofit world as well. So very interesting journey to get here today, but excited to be here.
All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about this. We got to jump right into Turnaround Queen. So where did that come from? So this name for you is so good, but as you pick that up in the financial sector, what are some of the key strategies you learned in the process of transforming an underperforming bank or credit union?
Yeah, that's a great question. So before I answer it fully on strategies, I do want to give context on where the turnaround queen came from. Yeah, before getting into the banking industry, and I refuse to say how many years ago that was. At this point, I'm at that age in my life. But when I did get started, before that, I had a history of turning around underperforming businesses. I, at the time, was managing a spa, had flipped that around, and my ex-husband convinced me I needed an adult job. And so he brought me over to the credit union that he worked at. And apparently massages are not an adult job. But anyway, so I moved over the credit union. And at that time, we were really trying to think about how do we scale and how do we create more ROI from branches. And so it was really when you started to see this mass influx of in-store locations and trying to shift what that meant. Because we had, at that time, we had a large credit union that had a lot of branches that were legacy kind of support centers. And we started to ask ourselves questions. When you look at a lot of these in-store branches and you look at ROI, usually you look at it as what's branch traffic. And I still today hear some institutions say, we're shutting branches because branch traffic is down. That's the wrong way to look at it. So when we looked at it, we said, what if we could ask ourselves a challenger question? And that question was, what if you replace the model of the people and your approach to the in-store branches and created a true like sales environment? What if you did that? And I think sometimes bankers think that's a bad word. It's not, because that's where revenue comes from. And it's if you do it the right way from a consultative approach, like you're still meeting your needs and your core values. So at that time, they brought me into this branch. It was severely underperforming. It basically was like a, let's try it out or we're going to close it kind of thing. And so what we did is we had a few people in that branch that were legacy, understood the systems, understood all the compliance language. We're from the kind of the branches that kind of look super boring, but they've got their operations on point. We had a few of those people. And then we had a couple that were like car salespeople. So there's a very big dichotomy between personalities. But we said, let's do a creative test and see if we could build something that's duplicatable. And so it started with this one branch, and we needed to find people that were willing to get on the PA, go hustle in the aisles, right? Do whatever it takes. And this kind of like sales energy, but was still founded in all the values we had as an institution. That worked great. We turned the branch around. We started to adopt that model. But the problem with anything is if you build it around one leader or one methodology and you can't duplicate that across 60, 70 branches, or even two, to be really honest, you're in big trouble, right? And so what we did as the next step is we built a program. We called ourselves the Eagles, and we had some of the best management team, best leaders. That was their job, is to say, what is the way that we're going to do this? What's the expectation? What's the management like measurement? And then they would go into branches and train and coach and help create this duplication process. And so immediately what started to happen is we could take the success from the sales team that we had started to model in this little branch and scale that. Then we'll talk about this later. I had twins, ended up changing an institution that I worked at and was put in a very similar situation. And that one was underperforming because they weren't adopting new technologies and transforming. So it was part of that. And then got hired by Chase and had to turn around a whole region. That was really what I have done my entire career. So that's where the turnaround came in. As far as key strategies, I could probably go on and on, but the first thing that I'll say is, and this is taboo, but I'll say it, and that is, you have to have the right people. And you say that all the time as leaders, but what I find is it's actually really scary to hold people accountable and be okay exiting people who, not that you don't love them anymore, but you're not playing soccer, you're playing rugby. That's a different game. That's a different playbook. It's a different body build. It's a different skill set, right? And so as leaders, if you really want to transform and you really want to grow, that's one of the first things I had to do is get the right people.
Excellent.
Wow.
Excellent.
That's great. Good. I think you just touched a little bit upon working for Chase, a big bank, right? So from small institutes moving into a big bank and then coming back to Kasasa, right? My question really is that what are the main learnings? How did it help or hurt your career? I don't know. And maybe you want to also tell some of the things that didn't really go well, right? Because a big institute is a big institute, right? It's have their own things. So
yeah. What was that? Yeah, all respect for everything that they've built and created. And also, it was like, I don't know if you guys have ever done those polar plunges, like in Mexico at resorts, how they're like, hey, go get in the hot tub and then go in an ice bath. That's what it felt like going from community institutions into the mega bank world. And part of the reason I did that was we had decided, my ex-husband and I, to move to Texas. And it was an opportunity I had to take on their North Texas division, one of their large locations, and scaling the success. And at that time in their history, these big institutions do these big pendulum swings. And I get it because it's like a turn in the Titanic, but it's a pandemic for them, really. And that is, they go into these like all about our customers, and then it's all about revenue and fees. And they don't know how to do both. And so what they tried to do is recruit a bunch of people from the community institution space to help create this in their branches. The problem is they were trying to do it bottom up. And so when you do it bottom up, you eventually hit a cog in the wheel where it's, nope, that doesn't work anymore, right? And then you have this vibe and this energy of, yeah, but what you did is awesome today, but what have you done for me lately? And also there's 500 people waiting for your job. So you have to work 80 hours a week. And if you don't, sorry, it's not our problem. And so I had this very whiplash effect. And okay, I'm now in this massive organization where I don't actually have value. And that was really hard because as a leader, you're trying to create value for your customer. You're trying to create value for your people, but you're also constantly under this thumb that's, it's not enough, it's not enough. And within a year, I took one of their locations that was one of their highest revenue, they call them performance level institutions. So they have like performance levels. It was a performance level 4, which basically means you're about to get the door shut because it's not profitable. It's bleeding money. It's really bad. I turned it into a performance level 1, which is like top 5% of all Chase locations, right? Within a year. And it was a massive institution, assets bigger than most banks and credit unions, right? And we got that turned in a year. And then they came back to me and they're like, I was telling my regionals, I was like, hey, I'm getting really burned out. Because at that time, I have 3 kids under the age of 3. And I'm like, I'm tired. I'm driving 45 minutes one way every day. I'm working 80 hours a week. Like, I need help. And I said, here's how I think I can do it. And the answer I got was like, there's other people who can do it if you don't want to do it. So that vibe was really hard, which is why I was not there for very long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'll cause some
Absolutely. So
burnout.
No, I've realized that you should not stay with any organization or with anybody who doesn't value who you are. And I believe that's honestly a good decision.
Yeah. And you can hold people accountable and still have value for them. I think people get really confused about that, right? Accountability, there's still a way to do that and create expectation, but still make the human feel valued. Right.
Exactly.
And that part they just didn't understand.
So we've pivoted. You obviously you burned out, but you found your place over to Kasasa. So you've been there 10 years. So what does it look like to kind of talk through the journey of what it looks like as a chief growth officer for these last decade? You know, obviously with technology changes and all sorts of other things going on, pandemics, and the way we do business, probably in all of those areas and financials has changed. What have you gone through in your journey in these last 10 years besides the big global events?
A lot. I think we all have. Here's the thing that I know is there's a lot of companies that have had to rally. There's a lot of companies who have had to, and executive teams who have quite candidly had to look at themselves in the mirror and each other and say, are we going to do it or what? Do we have what it takes to really grab that grit? And so before I share the journey, I do have to give our CEO a shout out because he has been one of the most powerful mentors in my life. And his I'm going to relentlessly give it. I'm going to be that like Braveheart guy that shows up and we're doing it. At one point in our company's history, when things were really rough, he shaved his head. He sat in the middle of the cubicles and was dialing. Like it's that kind of energy, and having a leader that I was able to come under and learn from made a big difference in my journey. So I want to set that first. So yeah, over the last 10 years, so my journey has been super fun. I tell people all the time, Kasasa is a established fintech company. We've been in business for 21 years. We pivot and we run in many ways like a startup. And the part of the reason for that is because our clients expect us to be disruptors, to be innovators, to help really be the fintech for community institutions, because trying to go out and build all the ancillary stuff to compete with Chime or SoFi or Chase or Walmart or whoever, it's like really most institutions, even if you're a $30-40 billion institution, it's really hard to be really good at all of that, right? No matter how good you are, how many resources you have. So we have had to become very nimble and very flexible and very much stay under that spirit of entrepreneurship versus we're running an organization that's a legacy platform, right? So that was one big vibe that I think actually really helped us in the pandemic. My journey at Kasasa for 10 years has been super exciting. I always tell people it's never a dull moment. In my interviews with people, I'm like, if you don't like change, you don't like to pivot, you're not hungry and self-motivated, you're going to hate working here. Like if you want every day to be the same, run the other direction, because it's not. Things are always evolving and changing because we take that very seriously when we were thinking about supporting our clients. I started as a client director, which is an account manager. So I had a portfolio of 30 clients that I supported. I obviously, because of my background, had a kind of a bend towards sales. So while I felt like a good consultant, I also loved selling, really looking at the challenges of our clients, cross-selling additional products and services, helping them upsell. So I stepped into, this is where Turnaround Queen comes back out. I stepped into our sales team, and my sales leader at the time, absolutely loved him. His name is Aaron. He was a great mentor. He looked at me when he was like, hey, I have this sales territory, right? You need to carry a sales bag, but we haven't sold anything in it in 5 years. We have 2 or 3 clients there. It's like really hard. And if I put you in this territory and I have to fire you, that's going to suck. So if you're going to take it, please be willing to do well, right? I don't want to be the person that fired you from Kasasa. So I was like, okay. So I took this risk, right? Ended up within that next rolling like 18 months or so, I sold about 26 institutions in that time frame. So had a lot of success, really loved it. And then we were in this place where it was like, hey, we need some support. We had a new product line coming out. And so they asked me to build our inside sales team. So I built an inside sales team for marketing and for these new product distribution channels. And then we also built an outside sales team for our new loan product. So I did this like weird hybrid role. It was really fun though. I learned a lot. It was like a 1 foot in new sales, 1 foot in client, and it had never really been done before, but we really worked through that, made that work. It was very startup-y because there was no sales process.
I was just going to say that it says totally startup. It's like your job role is whatever needs to be done.
Whatever needs to be done.
Can you tack that on? Just tack that on. Yes.
Yeah.
No, but I'll tell you, it's very, very similar situation has happened with me, Alisha, when I grew my career into account management, and I was really bored doing that. Saying I used to tell my CEO that I can do this job in 3 hours. I don't know what to do remaining 8 hours. And so he did the same thing. He gave me a sales, and in my company, we were very telco focused. One of the big telcos in US had some investment in us. So other telcos don't want to talk to us, and that investment has gone away. But we didn't have any big telco customer. We were like one telco company in America. And so I took a challenge of saying that, okay, I'll go and open up another big telco. He said the same thing, that you are sitting on a big $80 million revenue. You're getting good bonus. You're not going to get anything next year because I'm not going to pay you for not doing anything. And if you don't do anything, I'll give you 18 months. I would hate to fire you. So it turned out well. It took me around 12 plus months to sign a MSA, but we are talking the #1 largest telco in America. So it takes that much time. And now that is a $500 million account for the company. So it worked out, it shaped my career also. So I think I relate to that very similar story. You did mention that you manage sales as well as customer service, right?
Yeah.
I would just curious to understand from you, right, your approach in managing these diverse teams and what are those guiding principles, like leadership guiding principles that you use. That would be a great insight for us.
Yeah. I think what I found is focus is so important because you literally do get pulled in so many different directions, and the needs of both teams are very different, right? And the personas are very different. And so I think one of the things I go back to, and I said this earlier because it's so mission critical, I really had to build my team. I had to put the people that were in the boat that I knew I could trust. And that included some people that I was like, are they the best client success person or are they best salesperson? I don't know, but here's what I know they can do. It is people like you said, that I'm just going to put you in this because you've got a track record of figuring it out. I know that if I could put you in this place, you have enough success that you could figure it out. So what I did when I was rebuilding, because I went through a journey of rebuilding our client success organization after COVID, that had hit us really hard. And so I completely rebuilt that team from the ground up. And at one point there were 5 of us because there was so much turnover that was happening in that client team because we had to replace it with the right people. 2, we also had people that because of some of the stuff that we had faced in COVID were leaving. And so at one point there were like 5 or 6 of us that even knew how to support clients, including me as chief client officer, EVP at that time. It was like, we looked at each other, we're like, cool. So we have 800 clients. Which 500 are you going to hold? So it wasn't that drastic. It felt like that most days. When I was in that scenario, I use this analogy, and I don't take it lightly, but it's if I'm going to go to war, who do I want in my trenches with me? I always figure that out first. And then I build the org around that because you want to have the right team, the right people who have the right skills. You need to have the right people in the right seats, but first you have the right people on your bus, right? And so when I'm thinking about the dichotomy of the 2 different teams, it was important to hire on the CS side, not just somebody who was like a yes person, but we made a decision to say, what is the ideal profile of the person that we want to look at? Like, what is our in delivery state? And then we worked backwards and we created profiles or ICP kind of personas for the people on our team, not just that. And so that was the first piece, is like having the right people and then building the right training structures and creating meaningful overlap so there's connection. I think I've, even at our own organization, worked here at times where it was sales versus CS. And it was like, what are we throwing over the wall at each other? And so not just having the right people, but creating this like version of team. One example, everybody's seen the movie Miracle, right? I don't know if you guys, I played that at my national sales meeting. My first national sales meeting when both sides together. And we played this section where the coach, there's a part in there where the team they had lost really badly. He has them all lined up. They're running sprints to the point. This is like probably inhumane, right? Like people are throwing up and it's really bad. And you could tell they're tired. And every time they would come back, he'd say, who do you play for? And he'd ask an individual, who do you play for? And they would name off their prior college or their prior alma mater or whatever. And it wasn't until the coach of the team finally figured out and he said, I play for Team USA. And as soon as he said that, everybody was able to go home. That was the vibe that we were trying to create. Now, I wasn't making people throw up. They did give each other feedback, right? We can talk about team building later. Yeah, but it was that vibe of unity. And then also being able to get myopic and saying, let's look at your role as a client director, right? What are the most important things that you need to be up to? You need to add consultative strategic value to your institutions that is qualitative, and you have to be able to upsell them to solve problems that they're facing and help them to seek an increased value. That approach is different than a salesperson where you're doing a little bit of daily therapy and encouragement. I say that as a salesperson myself.
Oh, we're well aware. We're well aware. Yeah.
Right? And it's just a different dichotomy, but there's also overlap in unity. So I don't know if that answers the question, but yeah, gives a picture.
So if I had to summarize it, it's this, you build the people structure first, because if you get the right people, it seems, and this is what I learned in turnarounds and leading, was that when you get the right team, everything becomes easy. And Jay mentioned it. I could get my job done in 3 hours. That's because he had a really good team that he built. And I had an experience at a bank where like I show up at 9 and I can't do anything until 12 because everyone has gotten it
He's
taken
doing
care
their
of. I was
job.
like, literally, my assistant was like, go read the paper. I was like, okay. And sales were happening. I was like, and that's when I told my boss, get me out of here. Go find me something else to fix because we're wasting energy. But yeah, if you start that and you work towards the people is what,
Yeah.
and I think that's what you're saying. You've figured out really how to do well in that. Let's really concentrate on the people because at the end of the day, the people make the product.
Yeah, they do. And I also think the other rule of thumb I have is transparency. I think that there's like a lot of this in the industry and there's a lot of like thought leadership around it. But what I mean is, it doesn't mean I show up and tell my team all my darkest secrets and I have to show up and be the beacon of light. I've actually gotten negative reviews before that I'm toxically positive. And I was like, if I'm not positive, y'all, like you're in trouble because I am the leader. I have to be up here because I know you're going to show up right here, even on your best day, right? Because that's my job is to create and be the pioneer, right? In that energy level. And so I gave up on that a long time ago, like trying to make everybody happy. I think that's also key. Yeah. On the transparency front, again, not sharing like every detail of my life with my team, but being willing to say, hey guys, here's the challenge I'm facing. Here's what I heard you say. And this is how we need to solve this together. And so this is what this is creating. This is when you're saying this and you have this view. For example, one big thing we had to break apart between the client success and sales team was there was this old vibe of this is my client. Nobody in the whole company can touch them. They have to ask for my permission, blah, 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 blah. Like that. And I was like, that doesn't go. I'm hitting that with a hammer and we're shattering the brick wall. This is not your client. They have a contract with Kasasa. Kasasa is Team USA. Who else is on Team USA? Your RD. And just helping them, which is what we call our AEs. So the idea is, how do you create that accountability? How do you be transparent in the challenges and the tension points? Really help to use different personality profiles, things like that to help understand what that looks like.
That is amazing. Now, being a technologist at heart, I have to ask you this question. Okay. Yeah. How do you guys leverage technology, right? Especially for your sales, customer service. You have diverse teams, you're growing so fast, you have so many customers. So it's not easy saying that pick something, plug it in, and it's going to work.
No.
Right? You're definitely driving some transformation programs, you're driving some customization. So talk to me about how you leverage technology, how do you run these initiatives, how do you make them successful in your organization? Because I can have the best technology, but people don't like it or don't use it, or it's not tuned towards who Kasasa is, what's their DNA, it's not going to work, right? So talk to me about those things.
Yeah, I think one of the ways that we look at this is we look at every person in the entire organization has what we call a job map. So that's here's my job, here's my end customers, and what I owe each of those customers. And then what we do is we reverse engineer any of our processes, any of our goals, all of that. And every single employee at Kasasa, their number one customer is our clients and potential partners or prospects, right? So we reverse engineer from value prop and sales pitch. So one of the things that I learned from Gabe initially, like 10 years ago, Gabe's our CEO, is he would say, build the sales pitch of what you want to sell. And then as an executive team, we reverse engineer to say, how do we build that and how do we optimize it and how can we make that better? So I think that approach is really helpful because it's like, it's not sales versus product versus dev versus ops, right? No, we're all in sales and we're all looking at this is the deck we're trying to build, and then how do we create optimizations or how do we make that process better, right, for our clients, but then also for our internal teams. And it's this conversation of what technology do we have in place, what's working and not working, right? Example, we spun up a channel strategic partnership arm of our sales team that goes out and works with other organizations that are talking to banks and credit unions so we can refer business to each other. And one of the things that we were doing manually for a little bit was trying to pull in all these spreadsheets with client lists. If you have 800 client lists for us and one of our partners has 1,000 and we're trying to cross-reference, that's one partner. If we have 30, 40 partners, that gets really messy, right? So we can build a fancy Excel sheet that can do pivot tables and find the stuff. But what we've really been doing is saying, how can we use our CRM like Salesforce to make it easier for the sales team and more successful for the partners? So we're constantly looking at what's the end goal that we're all trying to achieve? What's the system we have in place, but what do we need next to make it better? and not being afraid to say, what could we do below the line to invest in this and have this is an interesting example we were actually just talking about this morning as a leadership team was when we're looking at trying to create this product release or this feature release, you can look at a product roadmap as product and dev and say, these are all the resources it's going to take. Here's what we could do to do it, right? Here's the technology that we have in place. How fast can we go? And then it's having the conversation of, okay, what if we could do a spike in resources that are below the line to create, what does that do to our product roadmap? What does that do to sales? What does that do to internal efforts and like added pressure for internal teams? How much of that could we? So that's constantly how we're looking at the whole organization working together.
Wow. Okay.
I love this idea. And just, I've never heard it put so succinctly. It's like the sales conversation leads the design. And in that, because the sales is telling the world what to expect from Kasasa, right? So what they say is literally what the world is looking to gain, right?
Yep.
So when somebody says, yeah, I will buy this, you have to show up with what the sales guy says. And if it's incongruent, they're like, wait, you told me this and I got this. And you're like, oh yeah, I forgot to mention whatever. It sounds like a used car salesman. But that I love the idea that you allow the sales structure and the sales communication to define the design of the processes to support that. And we see that a lot in CRM, that if no one uses it on the front end, executives don't know what the heck's happening in the first place. There's a straight line correlation, bad data in, no data to work from. And then they're like, why are we not getting what we need? And we're like, they don't want to use it. Your sales team doesn't need it. So this is really brilliant. I love that. And I do want to ask you, you've displayed some pretty strong characteristics of your person, which is great. We love it. I'm totally a fan. But as people are trying to move into roles such as yours, I really want to know, it's not just you as a person and your unique skills. It's obviously, it sounds like Gabe, is it Gabe, right? Yeah. Gabe clearly has some unique and dynamic type of leadership ideas. But I think that you both brought them to the table, which is why it works. So what kind of advice would you give someone as they're trying to work into this level of innovation and capacity and authority? You have to have both the ability to manage that authority as well as have the innovation to be able to drive and push new ideas and then keep the ball rolling. And I assume Ted Lasso is on your next SKO. Now the miracle was won. Now you got to use Ted Lasso with relentless positivity and see what happens. But I would love to just hear your thoughts on what your advice would be for people trying to get there.
Yeah, I think one of the things that works really well is we have a very strong executive team right now. And what makes it very strong is we all play our unique part. Right. And we're all wired very differently. One of the rules of building leadership teams, and again, it's one that I've been scrutinized for before, is that there's so much diversity in the team. And I do that in personal, like diversity is a word that gets thrown out a lot, but it's not just like diversity in background, it's diversity in personality, diversity in skill set. As a leader, I'm saying, here's what I know I'm good at. Here's what I know I'm not good at. I need some really strong people in that area to check me. So if you think about personality profiles, because I'm going to answer your question, and I think this will give good context, is you can go back to like DISC profiles, right? You've got the strong D dominant driver. You've got the I's who are the fun ideators, like entrepreneur. And then you've got the C's who keep it all together because they're on it. They're compliant. They're doing budgets. They're making sure you're within your process. And then you've got your S's who care about people and are making sure we're not like running so far ahead that the rest of the org is like, what is happening right now? And so really having balance, not just in your individual teams. So for me in the growth org, but also as a leadership team is important. And I think that we've done that well. So Gabe is a very strong leader, very strong visionary. He's amazing. I learned so much from him, and he is probably the smartest human being that I know ever. But he also, on my side, I'm like a driver, a get done. I'm a very strong like D personality. You probably picked that up with a little bit of the I like energy. And then you've also got like Vanessa, who's our president. She is a strong, like a D kind of C personality. So she keeps us on the rails and makes sure that we're all doing all the checks and balances. And then you've got different people with diverse backgrounds as well. But it's like having that team together is really critical because we can talk to each other and say, if this is the goal we're doing, how do we make sure we don't step on landmines or whatever it might be? So I think that's a really big part, is making sure it's not just one person or two people on the leadership team, but it's the entire team coming together and bringing their skills forward. I think one of the things that I heard a while ago is a lot of times when people coach people, they'll spend their time focusing on people who are their low performers. Actually, what you need to focus on more are your top performers, and then your like almost top performers, because you get higher ROI. The other folks, yes, you want to set expectations, you want to help set them up for success, but you don't spend 80% of your coaching time with somebody who's not going to do it, right? Because the front of your team leads the sled. So anyway, those are just some of the things that I think could touch on what you're saying.
So I guess you may all have diverse designs, D's and C's and things like that. And all of that is absolutely true. But there's also a kernel of how you create space for each other.
Oh,
how you honor the value of that. Like I often, as a banker, sales guy, I was always pushed up against compliance, and I had to learn and I had to work with a guy who literally said, go to the manual. And I'm like, the answer, just give me the answer. And he's read the manual. But 3 months of having him as my assistant, I could literally tell you what page on the manual of the 5 books behind me was like page third manual, page 57, right there. It's highlighted.
Can you just help me? Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, all of a sudden I was a C. And when I'm like, that's not even my skill set. But understanding that we honored each other and pushed each other in a way that created that. And I think what it sounds like is you can have all those things and have a strong driver for compliance who could drive you crazy. It's like they could drive the brake all day long and you're like, we're never getting anything done. And that, but there's an element there where so what do you see as the thing that, one or two of the things that keep that and keeping your business as Kasasa being both innovative and productive at the same time?
I think that it's being willing to have open, crucial conversations. One of the things that we intentionally built into our culture, we have a very, very good culture in terms of the way that we've structured our values, the way that we help employees own them. And one of those cultural values is empowered ownership, which means if it's to be, it's up to me, right? Like I'm going to own the outcome. And it's not just the outcome for my job, but my outcome for the organization and for other people. And then we have components of love your clients, love yourself, love your coworkers, not in the squishy kind, that can be the accountability kind too, but really care about each other. And then we have this form of interdependence where it's like, hey, in the Spartan army, we call our employees Spartans. In the Spartan army, my job was to hold the shield for the person next to me. And I had to rely that person next to me was protecting me too. And if they weren't and I died, that person was killed by the rest of the Spartans, because it's like your job is to protect the person next to you. So we created that vibe. The other thing was we have a value called badassitude. It really is the name of the value. And that means like we play for real and we're all playing for results. So having that foundation, what we're allowed to do is then say, and it's the highest value, right? It's the elevated version of all those values, which means if we're in a leadership meeting and you are being compliance person and you're pushing back on me, my job is not to get my feelings hurt and be like, man, you're just really hard, Steve. Like you're driving me crazy. Why are you doing this? It's being you aside and saying, Steve, here's what I know is important to you. Here's what I'm trying to achieve. I appreciate you helping me with this and seeing this risk. I need you to help me solve this, because together, this is what this means for us as an organization. And having that conversation in a way that's empathetic, but it's also, look, we're on the same team. And you have to have those conversations. And we can't let Steve stay if Steve's going to be toxic, right? Which is really hard. We call those the brilliant jerks in our culture training for our team. We're like, brilliant jerks don't get to stay. I don't care what your resume says. If you're a jerk and you're not willing to adapt to the culture, you can't stay, regardless of role. So
I love that word, brilliant jerks, because we see them all the time. I'll tell you, we faced in our projects also, right? That somebody's brilliant, but doesn't work with the team, and it creates a lot of problems.
You can go work at Chase if you want to be a brilliant.
I think we were trying to sell someone, and the person we were probably going to have to work with the most was that. And we were like, I don't think we want to go through the effort of winning this deal. Just don't know we want to go this way. We don't want to go down this route and have to live with it every day for months. Yeah. Oh. So
you have to think about it too. I always tell our team, and that's an important thing with sales leaders and client leaders, and even anybody who interacts with customers or potential partners. I tell them, like, we hold ourselves to the highest levels of our patch values. But as leaders, there's been times I've had to call clients, or I've had to call prospects and say, That's not how we treat our team. We would never treat somebody from your team that way, and we're not going to. So here's the standard, and I would love your business, but I don't need your business if that's how we're going to do things.
Correct. I tell you, I keep telling to my prospects, even to my customers, that I'm hungry for business, but I'm not starving. I'm ready to walk up. Right?
Yeah.
I always say that. And what Steve said, that's what we did. We didn't go forward with that company. We said it would put a lot of pressure on my team. I, as a salesperson, I'll win that deal, right? But I'm also owner of the company and I care about my people and the culture. So I don't think I want to put them through this. So absolutely, I think brilliant. Thank you so much, Alisha, for spending time with us, giving us so many inputs. I can talk to you whole day. I tell you, you're very continuous.
We'll call when we have a bad day. We're just going to be like, relentless positivity is what that is. Please, can you pass them over? Yeah.
I would love to spread it all.
We have 5 minutes call with you. Just want to see you.
Yeah. Yeah. My team and I joke because as part of COVID, one of the things that we did, had a bunch of people that went remote. Most of my team is in the field anyway. And we use Slack. So this is technology, right? We use Slack and we created a channel we called the Growth Forum. And after every on-site meeting or everything, they would do a quick video for a minute, 30 seconds. It was here's what happened. Here was my takeaway. It could also be, oh, my luggage is lost. And it's this picture of them crying. It's like the real-time thing. And it was a way for the team to use that technology to build relationship, to encourage each other, to learn best practices. And that actually became a video hodgepodge that we shared with the whole company at our company-wide meeting. Because I think a lot of times people who may be in dev or other areas, being a salesperson is glorious. I'm like,
I moved from tech to sales. And when I moved, I realized, because in technology, I used to feel I'm doing all the work. What the heck the sales guy is doing? When I moved there, I realized that, oh my God, sales is the hardest job.
This is the 3 hardest years of my career. Was right here. And I'm like, welcome to sales. Everybody thinks it looks all glorious. And you're like, no, not at all.
I was saying something to one of our technology leaders. I was like, if you ever want me to turn things around in the bad way, you can put me in behind a dev screen. That would not go well.
Thank you, Alisha, again. It was wonderful talking to you.
Yeah, it's so great to talk to you.
And thoughts before we close the podcast?
I think the only thing that I would say for people who are looking at growing in their career, or they're looking at what does it take to go through that journey of you were starting in a branch or the front line at an institution and then somehow worked your way up through leadership and all this stuff. The thing that I always tell people when they're like, how do you do that? I had goals in my career, but what I always told myself is I am always going to, one, be the very best I possibly can, exceed expectations, work as hard as possible, and always make my boss look good, right? And not just look at solving my own problems, but trying to solve other problems for the organization. And I was always doing the job of my next role before I got my next role. And so it was this no-duh thing. So because I would do that, and because I was so intentional, it was when these opportunities came open where they're like, we don't know who to put here. Guess what? We can just let you try it because you've been successful. That is how my career path went. It wasn't like client director to client manager to head of clients. It wasn't like that. It was a lot of this and just saying, I'm going to say yes. I'm just going to raise my hand and say, yes, I'll figure it out. And that's the best advice I give to people. That resilience cannot be taught. That's something that has to come from within. And so the last thing I'll share with you guys is my question that I always ask. It's my interview question. It's my number one. If somebody says the wrong answer to this question when I'm interviewing them, I will never hire them because it's the number one hiring interview question that I've had see work every single time. The question I ask is, if I'm interviewing you, Jay, and I would say, hey, Jay, everybody's motivated by something different. You tell me internally, what's your driver? Do you love to win more or do you hate to lose? And what I have found 100% of the time is somebody who says, I hate to lose, has an internal drive. They're more resilient. They're willing to be self-driven. They don't need you to pull them along. They're going to figure it out, right? They have more of that entrepreneur spirit because at the end of the day, they're like, I'm not going to do bad, right? I'm just not going to let myself do it. Somebody who loves to win is going to be like, I think I'm doing well. I don't know what's wrong with y'all.
Yeah. I don't care about it. I will disqualify it faster than not winnable. I think one thing that I learned when I came to sales is when a customer is not buying from you or saying no to you, I never heard it as no. I always heard it as not now, right? So, and that resilience is what really, it was in me. As you said, it was in me. I never knew. right? And that's why my company also put me from account management to sales to giving me a technology practice. So I'm saying that this guy will figure it out, what to do, And that's why I landed up here saying that, okay, if I can figure that out, I can figure out to build a company for myself. And that's actually what it started. But you're absolutely right. I think another thing that we had heard, Ryan, Steve, we do a lot of these podcasts and we are very fortunate to talk to people like you, is also that for the early team, if you want an early guy, go and hire a person, right, who has played some kind of sports at a college level at the least, right? You know why? Because that guy doesn't take failure, right? He takes failure as a learning. What can I do next? Next time I play, what can I do to win, right? And that is what you need in someone, right?
At the fintechs I worked at, it was college level something, music, sports, anything where the discipline that required to do repeatable processes is ingrained in their body because they've done it over and over again, and they didn't get to college professional level without practice, and that allows you to follow a process and adapt to that process. So I've always tended to work.
They grew up in a military household. Some of my best employees are like, my parents were in the military, and I'm like, yep, you got a disciplined life. The only other thing I really don't want to go without saying is, if you find yourself, if you are somebody who is a C-suite, you already have that, you've had a great career, you've been successful, it is imperative for you to make space at the table. For the next generation of leaders, I see succession planning falling apart in the industry because you don't have that. And because people are so protective and they have such a big ego about, I don't want somebody to take this from me. The most important thing that we can do is duplicate ourselves. I wouldn't have had my growth if Gabe, our CEO, or Vanessa, our president, they gave me opportunities and stretched me and held me accountable, but they made space. And so I think that's one of the things that I've really been dedicated to. I just did that with our EVP of client success, giving her that space. And you can have ego, but it doesn't help anybody. So it's build up that bench and let your team be focused and experts at the things that they're good at.
Great.
I agree. Mentorship is not something that most people understand or know what to do with. You could say, oh, it's all important, and they give a credence that you got to lead, you got to help others, and then they don't do anything to help others because they've never figured out how to do it. And mentorship is hard to find, and it's hard to give, and it's intentional. But if you make the space, there's nothing wrong with that. Watch people do jobs better than me. And I had to admit it. And I'm like, I need this guy to do that job. I'd love to do it, but if you take him or her, you are going to be much better off. I can do it, but start here. And that never failed me. It never failed me. And you build relationships for life through that. So
absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much for the time and sharing and the transparency and openness and the positivity and the fun and all the wisdom. It's been a great joy. And so we look forward to having others get to experience what you bring to the table.
Awesome. It was so much fun. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
All right.
I have one question before we hang up.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.